Hey, pass the Cabernet, would you? Because I'm looking at this massive stack of mid-July 2026 Federal Reserve reports I brought to the table. And it turns out the media's whole bedtime story about, magical interest rate cuts,
Oh, let me guess. It's completely wrong.
it is completely wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, if you are sitting there right now waiting for a 6.5% mortgage to just suddenly drop back down to pandemic levels before you buy or refinance, you're basically standing on a platform waiting for a ghost train.
A ghost train. Yeah, I like that. And thanks for the wine. It really isn't coming.
It's just not.
No. And honestly, I'm glad we're doing this here, at the Sunday dinner table, just the three of us. It is really good to be home.
Yeah, it's nice to just sit down and actually dig into this deep dive without the noise.
Exactly. There is absolutely nothing like this table. The smell of the roast, the clinking of the silverware, just finally catching our breath for a minute. But you are absolutely right about the data.
Because you've seen this before, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've been a loan officer for 3 decades now. I have sat through 3 massive market cycles. I mean, the booms, the busts, the sheer panic of 2008, the really weird euphoria of 2020.
Which makes you the perfect person to decipher all this.
Well, I try. And look, I'm not here to pitch a product to you, and I am certainly not going to lecture from some pedestal while we eat. We are sitting here having this meal so I can give you the ground truth.
Because out there, it's just chaos.
The world is moving incredibly fast right now. And if you're just reading the front page of the newspaper, you are completely blind to the back door being boarded up. You need to see what I see so we can protect this family's solvency.
That is exactly why I brought all this material to dinner. I really want to cut through the noise. We have these Fed reports, the macroeconomic data, the morning news archives from the past few weeks.
It's a lot of paper for a Sunday dinner, I'll give you that.
I know, but it honestly feels like we are living in 2 completely different realities right now. On one hand, you have talking heads on TV promising relief, and on the other hand, I'm looking at these non-mortgage macro indicators, and they are just wild.
Wild. Give me an example from the stack.
Okay, well, we have rideshare drivers successfully unionizing to stabilize their gig incomes.
Right.
You have the commercial real estate market, CRE, totally defying gravity and surging to a massive $703 billion.
Yep, the CRE balloon.
And then, completely out of left field, public schools across California are implementing mandatory extreme heat protocols. It just feels so disconnected. None of this seems to relate to each other.
It feels like chaos until you actually sit down, connect the dots, and look at the friction between the local reality and the global reality. Let's take those extreme heat protocols you just mentioned.
Okay, sure.
To the average parent, that's just, a health and safety memo shoved in their kid's backpack. But look at the actual mechanics of it. Implementing those protocols requires massive municipal infrastructure investments.
Like air conditioning.
Way more than that. We are talking about district-wide HVAC modernizations, constructing expansive shaded outdoor areas, retrofitting older buildings so they don't turn into ovens.
Yeah.
How do school districts pay for that?
I assume bonds or maybe state funding.
No, eventually it always comes down to emergency property tax reassessments or local parcel taxes, which get passed directly down to the homeowner.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it is a backdoor squeeze on your household liquidity. And it's not just the schools, by the way. Look at the environmental labor side. In those archives you brought, there's a fascinating piece on the collapse of the targeted goat grazing industry.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I read that and I literally thought it was a joke. Goat grazing. Like, how does a goat impact the macroeconomic picture, let alone my mortgage?
It sounds trivial, right? But it is the perfect example of how local friction destroys your monthly budget. California relied heavily on goat grazing to clear brush in high fire risk suburban areas.
Right, because it's eco-friendly.
Exactly. But the state allowed specific agricultural labor exemptions to expire. That meant the wages for the herders exploded.
Because of overtime rules and stuff.
Yes. Some reports showed costs jumping to $20,000 a month for a single herd just due to overtime and new labor mandates. The industry basically collapsed overnight.
Which means the goats are gone. And the brush just keeps growing.
Precisely. The goats are gone, leaving those suburban boundaries completely exposed to unchecked fire fuels accumulation. So what happens next?
Somebody else has to cut it down.
Right. The municipalities and the homeowners associations have to step in with human landscaping crews, which are exponentially more expensive than goats. And they pass massive emergency assessments down to the property owners to handle the brush clearing.
So it hits the homeowner again.
Always. Your fixed cash margins, the money you thought you had left over after paying your mortgage, are being systematically devoured by the downstream effects of these environmental and labor laws.
Wow. Okay, so the local municipal costs are skyrocketing. But here is the juxtaposition that makes absolutely no sense to me.
Try this potato while you explain it.
Oh, thanks. So at the exact same time I'm reading about these massive hidden costs, I'm also reading about incredible civic investment.
Right, the fun stuff.
Yeah. Walnut Creek is pouring money into exceptional family parks.
Yeah.
San Dimas just threw a massive luxury drone light show. Camp Keesum is expanding its footprint at UCLA, and the Anaheim Children's Festival drew record crowds.
Yep.
You have this beautiful, vibrant civic life, heavily subsidized by local governments, while the middle class is secretly drowning in carrying costs. How does that work?
It's a smokescreen. The local municipalities are actively subsidizing the quality of life to mask the underlying economic heat,
To keep people happy.
to keep people from leaving. They are throwing money at community programs like OC libraries using therapy dogs, or Calabasas funding expansive summer lunch programs because they need to keep the civic core highly desirable. They desperately need to protect their tax base. But while the local level feels incredibly vibrant and wealthy, the global pressures are creating a vice grip.
Okay, so it's like we're throwing a luxury drone show
Yeah.
on the deck of the Titanic.
I love that analogy. That is exactly what it is. Because while we're sitting around watching the drone show, the global economy is burning. Look at the July warning from the IMF, the International Monetary Fund.
I saw that one. It was pretty grim.
They explicitly stated that the global economy is caught in a cross-current of war and technology. We are dealing with massive, sustained energy shocks from the ongoing conflict in Iran.
Which spikes oil prices.
Exactly. Brent crude oil prices are spiking.
Right.
That drives up domestic gasoline costs, shipping costs, and manufacturing costs here at home. All of that bleeds directly into the core inflation metrics that the Federal Reserve monitors.
And because that imported inflation stays high, the Fed has to keep domestic mortgage rates elevated to cool the economy.
Got it.
So we are essentially importing our high mortgage rates from geopolitical conflicts halfway across the world.
Precisely. You cannot look at your local housing market in a vacuum. You have to digest this global reality. Speaking of which, pass me some more of those roasted potatoes. We really need to move into the actual mechanics of what the Federal Reserve is doing about this.
Because things have changed at the Fed,
Right? The monetary architecture of this country just underwent a seismic shift.
Well, the shift is undeniable in these July reports. The U.S. Senate just confirmed Kevin Warsh as the new Federal Reserve Chair in a highly divisive 54-45 vote.
Right.
Jerome Powell's term ended back in May. The Department of Justice officially dropped their criminal investigation into his building renovation funds, and now Warsh has taken the oath of office.
And he's not going anywhere.
No, he is locked in through 2030. And from everything I've read in this stack, Warsh is an absolute uncompromising inflation hawk.
Hawk is almost an understatement. Warsh represents a hardline return to pre-2008 highly restrictive monetary management. You know the concept of the Fed put.
The Fed put, yeah, that's the historical pattern where, like, the second the stock market drops or consumers feel a little bit of pain, the central bank rushes in, slashes interest rates, and bails everyone outright.
Exactly. Well, the Fed put is officially dead. It has been structurally dismantled.
Wow.
Yeah. Warsh didn't just take the job to maintain the status quo. He immediately launched 5 brand new specialized task forces to actively shrink the Fed's multi-trillion-dollar balance sheet.
5.
5. They are ruthlessly reviewing communications. They are overhauling the inflation framework. They are auditing data sources. This is a regime that will not rescue you if you over-leverage yourself.
And we are seeing that immediately in the bond market. The 10-year Treasury yield is facing incredibly heavy resistance at 4.60%.
Yeah.
And because mortgage rates basically track that 10-year yield plus a risk spread, lenders have no choice but to price loans high. Freddie Mac just reported the baseline 30-year fixed mortgage rate hit 6.55% in mid-July.
Which goes right back to your ghost train analogy. If you were sitting here at the table with us, delaying optimizing your debt because you are convinced rates will magically fall, you are exposing your household to a terminal policy rate plateau.
A terminal plateau. That sounds permanent.
For the foreseeable future, it is. The Federal Open Market Committee, the FOMC, unanimously selected Warsh to enforce this rigid anti-inflationary agenda. Because those task forces are shrinking the Fed's balance sheet, private capital is going to demand higher risk premiums.
So even if the Fed cuts a tiny bit,
Right. Even if the headline federal funds rate drops a tiny quarter point just for political optics, the actual consumer mortgage rates will stay stubbornly anchored in the mid 6% tier.
but hold on, let me push back on this a little.
Yeah.
If rates stay artificially anchored this high, doesn't that mathematically guarantee a housing crash?
A lot of people think that.
Right, because people assume that 6.5% mortgages will eventually break the consumer, nobody will be able to afford to buy, and prices will just plummet.
That is the logical assumption, sure, but it completely ignores the structural reality of the current economy. The illusion of an impending real estate crash is thoroughly dismantled by the actual data you brought tonight. Look at the San Francisco Fed analysis.
Okay, flip into that.
They just proved that the national labor market hasn't fractured. It has actually achieved a sustainable, resilient balance. And look at the July Beige Book.
Right, the Beige Book noted that corporate sales increases are being driven by sticky consumer pricing power.
Exactly.
Consumers are spending more money to get less product, but they are still spending.
Precisely. We aren't seeing asset degradation. Furthermore, the Kansas City Fed reports GDP growth is perfectly stable at 2.75%. The economy is successfully absorbing these high rates without breaking. The floor is in.
Okay, the broader economy might be absorbing it, but what about the actual credit window? Because it seems like getting a loan is getting exponentially harder. It is. Vice Chair Michelle Bowman just delivered a testimony doubling down on strict banking supervision.
That is the silent squeeze. This is the part the mainstream media ignores. With the DOJ investigation cleared and Warsh firmly in charge, the Fed is fully aligned. In mid-July, they executed consecutive formal enforcement actions against non-compliant financial institutions.
They're cracking down.
Hard. They issued joint agency statements aggressively tightening data security protocols during bank exams.
So what does that mean for the person just trying to get a standard mortgage?
It means the administrative bottleneck for approvals is shrinking rapidly. Commercial banks are terrified of the Fed's enforcement actions, so they are quietly raising their internal underwriting thresholds to protect their capital ratios.
Making it harder to qualify.
Exactly. They are demanding higher credit scores, more cash in reserves, lower debt-to-income ratios. If you wait to refinance, thinking you have plenty of time, you might find yourself completely excluded from the credit window tomorrow. Not because rates went up, but because the bank simply refuses to lend to your risk profile under the new rules.
That actually ties into a really interesting piece of data from the ATEPM mid-year U.S. foreclosure market report that I wanted to ask you about.
Oh, the foreclosure numbers.
Yeah, foreclosure filings are up 21% year over year. A lot of people see that 21% jump and scream, the crash is here.
Right.
But the report also noted that the average time required to complete a residential foreclosure has shrunk to just 563 days, which is the fastest pace recorded since 2013.
And that 563-day metric is crucial to understand.
Wait, I have to challenge you on this. You and the report are calling 563 days a fast pace, a year and a half to foreclose on a house.
From an institutional level, yes.
But how on earth is 563 days efficient? To a family losing their home, that is a slow-motion nightmare. What is the bank actually doing for a year and a half?
That is a very fair point. And look, to the family, it is an absolute tragedy, but you have to look at it from the macroeconomic level. During the pandemic, judicial logjams meant foreclosures were taking 3, 4, sometimes 5 years to clear.
Right. Nobody can process the paperwork.
Exactly. Banks were choking on unliquidated assets. So a 563-day timeline proves that those pandemic-era judicial logjams have been completely cleared out. The banking system has engineered a hyper-efficient mechanism for recycling distressed real estate.
Okay, so they process the paperwork faster. But where do the houses go? If foreclosures are up 21%, shouldn't that flood the market with cheap inventory and drive down prices for everyday buyers?
That is exactly the misconception. The houses never hit the retail market.
Where do they go?
Institutional capital, private equity firms, massive hedge funds, they are aggressively and efficiently absorbing these defaults behind the scenes, wholesale, before they can accumulate on the MLS and cause a visible retail price crash.
Oh, wow. So waiting for a housing crash is basically like waiting for a clearance sale at a luxury boutique, completely unaware that the boutique secretly sells all of its overstock to private buyers out the back door before the public ever sees a discount sign in the window.
That is a brilliant way to put it, yes. The banks are ruthlessly purging weak leverage to protect their balance sheets, and institutional buyers are scooping it up. If you are sitting on the sidelines holding onto your cash, waiting for a crash to buy a cheap house, you are going to be left empty-handed.
Because the big guys got there first.
The institutions will always beat you to the distressed inventory. Always.
But what if the media is right? Just a little bit. What if rates do drop? The National Association of Realtors, the NAR, put out a prediction for a minor 50 basis point drop moving into 2027, eventually settling near 6.0%.
I saw that.
If I'm sitting at this table, shouldn't I just wait for that 6.0%?
The Texas Real Estate Research Center modeled exactly what would happen in that scenario, and it is a terrifying prospect for a buyer. Do you remember the 400 basis point rate surge that led up to late 2022?
Yeah, rates basically quadrupled in a matter of months. It was insane.
Right. That created a massive historic lock-in effect. Millions of qualified buyers were instantly sidelined. They are currently sitting in apartments, hoarding cash, just waiting for a signal. If rates touch 6%, it will act as a psychological trigger for all that pent-up consumer demand.
Millions of sideline buyers will immediately flood the market simultaneously.
Because everyone thinks 6% is the new 3%, and because inventory is still artificially constrained, that massive wave of demand would cause asset inflation to skyrocket. We would see home values shoot up by double digits practically overnight.
Let me do the math on that. If I wait for the rate to drop 0.5%, I might save, what, maybe $150 a month on interest?
Roughly, yeah.
But if the house price shoots up 15% because of a bidding war, I am financing tens of thousands of dollars more in principal. That completely wipes out any monthly savings from the lower rate.
Precisely. You are voluntarily paying a massive premium on the purchase price just to avoid a temporary 6.5% interest rate. Structuring your financing today allows you to optimize your debt portfolio in an insulated environment.
Avoiding the bidding wars.
Exactly. Before the next wave of asset inflation permanently devalues your purchasing power.
This is incredibly eye-opening. Let's pour a little more wine because I want to shift our focus to the actual ground we stand on.
Good idea.
Because national news and federal funds rates are great, but they don't mean much if you don't understand your specific geography. Let's look at regional equity moats and environmental arbitrage, specifically these California micro-markets in the reports.
The micromarkets are where the real wealth preservation happens. National headlines completely blur the reality of localized sovereign wealth zip codes. You just cannot compare an acre in Ohio to an acre in Orange County.
The data on Orange County is fascinating. Irvine was just officially named America's greenest city.
Right.
Fremont holds the title for the highest happiness metrics. And we are seeing this massive expansion of luxury master plan communities in places like Roseville and, again, Irvine.
And why is that happening? It is all about capturing generational wealth transfers. We are seeing a massive sociological trend of East Bay baby boomers finally downsizing.
Getting out of the big houses?
Yep, they are unlocking trillions of dollars in dormant legacy home equity, and they are bringing those cash-heavy capital flows directly into these highly managed green communities.
Because they want the therapy dogs, the pristine parks, and the solar grids.
Yes, but financially, cities with advanced environmental infrastructure naturally compress capitalization rates for residential assets.
Hold on, let's translate that for me. Compressed capitalization rates.
Yeah.
You mean that because these eco-friendly, highly amenitized homes are in such incredible demand from cash-rich boomers, the upfront purchase prices are driven so high that an investor's actual rate of return, the cap rate, shrinks?
Exactly. The buy-in cost is astronomical, which means only the hyper-wealthy or the heavily equitized can afford to enter. That creates an impenetrable microsupply moat.
A moat.
This ecological and amenity shielding completely decouples the neighborhood from national real estate corrections. Because everyone in these eco-neighborhoods pays in cash or has massive equity, they don't care what Kevin Warsh does with interest rates.
They don't need a mortgage anyway.
Right. They are living in their own private, recession-proof bubble.
And the data totally backs this up across different sectors. Look at San Diego. Its coastal real estate dominance is fortified by thriving, heavily subsidized biotech and defense industries. It is functionally a recession-proof asset class.
Very true.
And then you look at Palo Alto. The median household income there is a staggering $224,666.
Palo Alto is a perfect example. It represents the absolute pinnacle of technology wealth concentration. When a community's median income exceeds $224,000, property liquidity becomes completely untethered from federal funds rate manipulation.
It's just a different world.
Property values in that hyper-elite enclave operate as a direct, highly leveraged proxy for NASDAQ performance, rather than standard consumer real estate metrics.
Meaning, if Apple and NVIDIA stock go up, Palo Alto house prices go up, regardless of whether mortgage rates are 3% or 8%.
Exactly. If you hold a standard, conventional retail mortgage in that market, you are fundamentally mispricing your financial leverage. You shouldn't be using a standard Fannie Mae loan. You should be utilizing sophisticated, asset-backed portfolio financing from a private bank.
Because you have the assets to back it up.
Right, because the neighborhood's income profile should be commanding wholesale institutional rates.
That makes total sense. Now, speaking of things happening in California that impact borrowing power, here's a headline that caught my eye.
Okay, what is it?
Bamboo Insurance just injected $150 million in admitted capacity into the California homeowners market. When I read that, it sounded like incredibly dry corporate news. How does an insurance company's capital injection actually impact the listener's ability to get a mortgage?
It is not dry at all. It impacts your debt-to-income ratio, your DTI, directly. Let me explain the mechanism.
Please do.
California's housing crisis right now is heavily driven by insurance unavailability. Major carriers pulled out because of wildfire risks. That forced thousands of homeowners onto the California FAIR Plan, which is the state's insurer of last resort.
And the FAIR Plan is notoriously expensive, right?
Astronomically expensive.
Yeah.
So when a private carrier like Bamboo injects $150 million in admitted capacity, it means they are legally allowed to write standard policies again. You can drop the ultra-expensive FAIR Plan mandate and replace it with a normalized competitive policy.
Which means your monthly insurance premium might drop from, say, $800 down to $300.
Exactly. Suddenly you have $500 of extra cash flow every single month. That immediately lowers your debt-to-income ratio, which suddenly allows you to qualify for a mortgage or a refinance that you were locked out of yesterday.
Oh, just from an insurance switch.
But here's the catch. This expansion of private capital represents a highly cyclical, narrow underwriting window. It is a temporary liquidity injection.
Why temporary?
Because the next bad wildfire season will instantly trigger another private capital retreat. The insurance companies will pull back again. If you delay optimizing your mortgage while this insurance capacity is liquid and cheap, you are gambling.
The gambling that it will stay cheap.
You're gambling that you can still clear the bank's strict DTI guidelines next season when your insurance premiums inevitably spike again.
You have to strike while the iron is hot.
Always.
And speaking of state-level interventions, Governor Gavin Newsom has been signing a slew of housing affordability trailer bills. Everyone at the dinner table cheers for deregulation, assuming that slashing building approval times and cutting red tape is a massive win for the state.
You do assume that.
But these transit-oriented density mandates, like SB 79, are they actually a good thing for existing homeowners?
This is one of the most misunderstood dynamics in real estate right now. While people cheer for housing reform and deregulation, that massive legislative shift is systematically dismantling the artificial scarcity that has historically propped up legacy California single-family home prices.
So by making it easier to build duplexes and apartment buildings near transit hubs, the state is diluting the value of the traditional single-family home.
Exactly. By rapidly expanding transit-oriented supply, this law actively dilutes the historic equity buffer of unmanaged single-family parcels. The state is actively engineering a supply wave designed specifically to devalue neighborhood exclusivity in order to make housing affordable.
So it's good for new buyers, bad for current owners.
If you are sitting on a massive pile of home equity in one of these targeted zones, you need to extract that peak equity via strategic refinance before those construction crews arrive and permanently alter the density and valuation of your neighborhood.
Wow. We are really peeling back the layers here. Let me grab the Parmesan cheese for this pasta because as we move into this next concept, I feel like it's going to be tough to swallow.
Oh boy. Bring on the cheese.
We need to talk about structural affordability, decoupling, and carrying cost compression.
It is the harsh reality of the 2026 landscape. We have established that there is a fragile equilibrium between cautious buyers and realistic sellers, but it is defined by a complete mathematical decoupling of asset prices and borrowing costs.
Right, because here is the massive contradiction I am seeing in the data. Mortgage rates are firmly anchored at 6.55%, but Realtor.com has downgraded its national home price growth forecast to a sluggish 1.2% for the year.
Yep.
Meanwhile, the Fed's PCE inflation forecast is tracking at 3.6%.
So what does the math tell you?
Mathematically, homes are technically depreciating in real economic terms. If your house goes up in value by 1.2%, but the cost of everything else goes up by 3.6%, you are losing purchasing power.
You are.
But the raw prices of the homes refuse to drop. Why aren't prices falling if the real value is degrading?
They refuse to drop because of the lock-in effect, which we discussed earlier, but let's look at it as a set of golden handcuffs. Millions of homeowners possess pandemic-era mortgages locked solidly below 4%. It is incredibly cheap debt.
So they don't want to let it go.
They are entirely disincentivized from moving because upgrading to a slightly larger home requires trading their beautiful 3% golden handcuffs for a heavy new 6.55% loan. It would cost them thousands of dollars more a month just in interest.
So nobody sells, which paralyzes nationwide inventory.
Exactly. The lack of supply props up the raw price. But because inflation is tracking at 3.6%, you are currently paying a massive inflation tax on your primary asset. You're sitting in your house, watching your asset's true purchasing power decay in the shadow of inflation, while holding on to an unoptimized static debt layout.
It's a slow bleed. It's a lose-lose if you just sit there and do nothing.
Right.
And we are seeing the cracks form geographically. I mentioned earlier that AT data showed a 21% surge in foreclosures.
Right.
But when you look closer, it is not evenly distributed. Florida, South Carolina, and Indiana lead the nation. Florida has a 0.27% foreclosure rate, heavily concentrated in places like Punta Gorda and Lakeland. Why those specific states?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you have to understand that this is not a repeat of 2008. In 2008, foreclosures were driven by toxic, exploding adjustable rate mortgages. People literally could not afford the basic loan payment.
The famous subprime crisis.
Yes. Today, these defaults are entirely decoupled from toxic mortgage products. This is what we call carrying cost compression.
Meaning the cost of simply existing in the house is crushing them, not the loan itself.
Exactly. Highly leveraged households are experiencing acute financial strain from compounding everyday costs. In places like Florida, skyrocketing homeowners' insurance premiums due to hurricanes, coupled with rapidly rising property taxes and general consumer inflation, are breaking household budgets.
So it's everything else.
The mortgage isn't the problem. The non-negotiable ancillary liabilities, the taxes, the insurance, the utilities are pushing perfectly good borrowers into default.
Which brings us back to how local municipalities are trying to fight this crisis. I saw a report in here that Garden Grove, California, is giving out up to $110,000 in HUD-certified down payment assistance grants through a Keys to Homeownership program.
Right, I saw that.
On the surface, that sounds like an amazing lifeline for first-time buyers. But what does a massive government grant actually do to the broader market mechanics?
It creates a highly artificial microequilibrium. This massive municipal capital injection represents an emergency state intervention. The goal is to artificially engineer a price floor at the bottom of the housing market so their citizens don't get priced out.
Sure.
But think about what that does on a macro level. It directly defies the Federal Reserve's demand destruction goals. The Fed is raising rates to cool demand and lower prices, and the local city is pumping $110,000 grants into the market to keep demand high.
It's a tug of war. The Fed pulls one way, the city pulls the other.
Exactly. By pumping cash into the neighborhood's valuation baseline, the city is temporarily inflating values. If you are an existing homeowner in that area, this local subsidy offers you a highly artificial peak equity window.
So I should use it.
You have to capitalize on this government-underwritten equity stability before federal monetary constraints eventually force a broader contraction and that municipal grant funding dries up.
So you basically use the city's subsidy to lock in your own premium financing while the appraisal value is artificially high. That's brilliant.
It's just smart balance sheet management.
But on the flip side of local government actions, we talked earlier about the mandatory extreme heat protocols in schools. People look at that and think it's just a student health issue, dealing with a 30% jump in pediatric emergency room visits for heat illness.
It is a critical health issue, but it is also a massive financial mechanism. We touched on this, but let's go deeper. Those climate-driven adjustments require multi-million-dollar infrastructural overhauls, HVAC systems, electrical grid upgrades for the schools.
And like you said, that funding doesn't appear out of thin air.
Emergency property tax reassessments are passed straight down to you, the homeowner.
So your unoptimized mortgage is already siphoning off critical cash flow right as these non-negotiable climate taxes escalate. You're being squeezed by peak bank interest on one side and climate-driven municipal expenditures on the other.
That is the definition of carrying cost compression. Refinancing or optimizing your debt today allows you to flatten your fixed interest obligations, providing the cash flow insulation you desperately need to absorb those unavoidable tax escalations coming from the local level.
Okay, let's clear these dinner plates.
Yeah.
I am bringing out the espresso and a massive tray of powdered cannolis. We need the sugar because the next phase of this is massive
I'll pour a splash of anisette into my coffee for this one. Thank you.
because we have to zoom way out.
Yeah.
We need to talk about global capital migration and yield spread optimization. The IMF's July World Economic Outlook is literally titled Global Economy and Cross-Currents of War and Technology.
Yes, the big picture.
They are explicitly warning that the global recovery is highly uneven and geopolitical fractures are deepening.
And when geopolitical fractures deepen, global capital gets terrified. Institutional money hates uncertainty. When international equities and bond markets fracture due to war and energy shocks, institutional capital seeks defensive, durable, tangible assets.
Meaning real estate.
Yes, but specifically, we are seeing a massive, multi-billion-dollar rotation of global institutional capital away from traditional commercial office space, which is dying post-pandemic, and directly into residential living sectors.
So they're buying where people live.
They are buying up multifamily apartments, build-to-rent communities, and student housing. Sovereign wealth funds from overseas and domestic private equity giants are intentionally targeting individual consumer rent rolls to stabilize their massive portfolios.
So corporate giants are actively buying up the foundational collateral of our neighborhoods to hedge against global war. That is intense.
It is.
And it's not just capital moving across borders. It's the cost of the actual materials to build the houses. The reports highlight looming supply chain tariffs on essential building materials like steel, aluminum, and glass.
And how do tariffs operate in the real world? They act as a regressive, state-sanctioned tax on new domestic housing formation. If a builder has to pay 25% more for steel and glass, they simply cannot afford to build entry-level homes.
It just kills the margins.
It dramatically inflates construction costs and locks the market in a state of artificial supply starvation.
Which means no new houses get built, which means the houses that already exist become infinitely more valuable.
Exactly. This construction paralysis acts as an unyielding value enhancer for existing properties. It shields legacy homeowners from inventory dilution. But here's the critical part. You have to optimize the expensive mortgage that services that property to actually benefit from it. Being rich on paper means nothing if you are drowning in monthly payments.
Let's look at what's happening outside the U.S., because the contrast is genuinely terrifying. The data here shows Canadian personal bankruptcies are hitting 2009 financial crisis levels. Why is the Canadian housing market breaking while the American market is just bending?
This is one of the most crucial lessons of this entire deep dive. The wave of insolvency in Canada is driven entirely by their unique structural mortgage mechanics. The Canadian system forces a complete interest rate renegotiation every 5 years.
Wait, really? You can't just lock in a rate for 30 years and forget about it?
No. Imagine if you bought a house at 2% in 2020. In 2025, the bank forces you to renegotiate based on current market rates.
Oh my God.
So Canadian homeowners are suddenly jumping from a 2% payment to a 7% payment overnight. It exposes consumers directly to the brutal reality of current high monetary policy. They are experiencing catastrophic payment shocks, which leads directly to the surge in bankruptcies.
That makes the American 30-year fixed-rate mortgage look like an absolute superpower.
It is a superpower. The U.S. 30-year fixed rate is a rare government-subsidized macroeconomic insurance policy. It completely insulates the American consumer from global central bank volatility.
Wow.
If the Fed raises rates to 10% tomorrow, your 30-year fixed mortgage does not care. Your payment stays exactly the same. If you refuse to optimize your fixed rate positioning today, you are failing to value the absolute immunity your loan structure provides against the global liquidity fracture.
It's incredible to think of a standard 30-year fixed loan as a luxury, but globally, it really is. And look at the EU. Eurostat data shows that despite extreme interest rates across Europe, house prices in the euro area surged by 4.7%. How does that happen when borrowing costs are so punishingly high?
Because basic supply and demand mathematics will always overpower central bank attempts to suppress real estate values. Europe has a chronic systemic construction undersupply. Household formation across Western economies is occurring much faster than actual residential completions. People need a place to live, and there simply aren't enough doors.
And they can't just build more because of the tariffs and material costs we just talked about.
Exactly. That supply-side deficit is structurally permanent due to skilled labor shortages and high commodity costs. Real estate valuations carry a permanent scarcity premium globally.
Okay, pass me another one of those cannolis. My brain is working in overdrive.
They're good, right?
Amazing. Okay, we are moving into the final major shift in the data demographics, co-purchasing, and urban density transitions. The American dream is being sociologically reorganized right in front of us.
It is a complete, irreversible structural breakdown of the historical housing ladder. The days of graduating college, working for 2 years, and buying a starter home in the suburbs are largely over.
The numbers validate that.
Yeah.
The market share of first-time home buyers has plummeted to an all-time record low of 21%. The median age of a first-time buyer is now 40 years old. But here's the statistic that blew my mind. A staggering 19% of Generation X buyers are currently executing multi-generational co-purchases with their adult children.
What's fascinating here is how humans adapt to economic pressure. The post-war single-family nuclear housing model is financially obsolete within a high-interest rate macroeconomic climate. A single income, or even a standard dual income, simply cannot service the debt required to buy a median-priced home in a major metro.
It's just too expensive.
So the relentless financialization of housing has forced Western demographics to revert to multi-income, multi-generational communal structures out of sheer economic survival.
They're pooling their resources.
Exactly. Stacking the verified income streams of 3 generational tiers, the grandparents, the parents, and the adult children, onto a single optimized mortgage significantly lowers the institutional default probabilities. The bank loves it because the risk is spread out, and by doing this, these multi-generational families are creating an artificial valuation floor that props up neighborhood pricing.
Wow. So if I am trying to buy a house by myself or just with my spouse, I am essentially bidding against a family that has 3 or 4 distinct income streams pooling their money.
Precisely. If you are holding an unoptimized solo mortgage, you are competing in a housing ecosystem where property values are actively underwritten by consolidated multi-generational income pools. You are structurally outgunned.
And the builders know it. Residential builders are retooling their product lines. The data shows they are abandoning traditional 3-bedroom starter homes to manufacture dual primary floor plans and integrated accessory dwelling units, ADUs, right into the original blueprint.
That's the new model.
It's a permanent shift in how we live, and it's changing where we want to live too. 59% of buyers state they would willingly sacrifice a larger yard in exchange for a highly walkable neighborhood.
That is a massive cultural repudiation of the classic car-dependent suburban sprawl.
Yeah.
Modern metropolitan professionals place an absolute valuation premium on time efficiency and reduced transit friction. They don't want to commute 2 hours a day.
Nobody does.
Furthermore, from a financial perspective, compact, mixed-use commercial corridors suffer significantly less valuation volatility during economic downturns due to continuous, reliable foot traffic.
So a house near a coffee shop and a grocery store hold its value better than a McMansion out in the middle of nowhere.
Undeniably. Properties inside highly walkable zones carry an inherent liquidity multiplier that is highly favored by private portfolio lenders. If you own a walkable urban asset, you need to leverage its high walk score to lock in optimal financing terms, because banks view it as premium collateral.
But for those who don't already own, the rent-to-own math is just brutal. The Legislative Analyst's Office reveals that the monthly cost premium of owning a home versus renting a comparable property in California has hit an unprecedented 62%.
And that 62% ownership premium destroys the historical pathway to organic equity generation for new market entrants. It has effectively trapped millions of would-be buyers in prolonged tenancies. Tenant retention has hit absolute cyclical peaks due to financial entrapment. People simply cannot afford to leave their rental.
Which is fantastic for the corporate landlords we talked about earlier.
It grants corporate and private landlords unprecedented monopolistic pricing power over the rental pool. If you already own a home, your ownership status puts you in an elite minority. You possess membership in a closed-loop system of legacy wealth. But just owning it isn't enough. You must optimize your structural interest expense to maximize the cash flow spread of your asset against inflation.
The divide between owners and renters is just widening permanently. Now, I want to bring up one last piece of the puzzle from the Federal Reserve reports before we wrap this up. Federal Reserve Governor Michael S. Barr gave a highly technical speech addressing the rapidly expanding integration of artificial intelligence within the financial industry.
Yes, AI.
He discussed AI as both a massive efficiency driver and a systemic risk, calling for robust risk management frameworks. How does AI at the federal level impact my mortgage application at the local bank?
This is the final, unseen gatekeeper, and it is arguably the most important shift in modern lending. Automated AI underwriting engines are being rapidly deployed across wholesale lending channels to systematically eliminate human exception parameters.
What do you mean by human exception parameters?
Let's say you apply for a loan with me. Your debt-to-income ratio is slightly too high, maybe 46% instead of the required 45%.
Okay.
But I look at your file, I see you have a massive savings account, you have a flawless 20-year payment history, and I know your industry is stable. As human loan officer, I can write an exception. I can argue your case to the underwriter and get the loan approved based on common sense.
But the AI doesn't care about common sense?
The AI does not care. These rigid algorithmic risk models carry a profound pro-cyclical bias. They look purely at the data parameters. At the first sign of macroeconomic volatility, say, a slight dip in GDP or a spike in local unemployment, the automated system will instantly freeze borrower approvals and unconditionally contract credit access.
It just shuts the door.
Completely. AI underwriting engines compress traditional exception parameters, leaving absolutely zero flexibility for non-standard borrower files, self-employed income anomalies, or complex property valuations.
So if I wait to apply for a loan, thinking my 800 credit score will save me,
If you delay your debt restructuring, you are actively gambling that your pristine credit profile can survive the unyielding scrutiny of a soulless AI algorithm tomorrow, after the bank officially removes human discretion from the underwriting pipeline. You must secure your financing terms today under current human-mitigated guidelines, while you still have the ability to explain your financial story to an actual person.
Okay, let's unpack everything we've just talked about, because this has been a massive journey. We've gone from local heat protocols in public schools eating up municipal budgets, to Kevin Warsh's hawkish Fed destroying the Fed put, to the collapse of the Canadian mortgage structure compared to our 30-year fixed superpower, all the way to soulless AI underwriting algorithms freezing credit windows.
That's a lot, I know.
It is a tremendous amount of information to digest alongside this dinner. Bring this all back to the listener sitting right here at the table with us. What is the ultimate strategy? What is the final takeaway?
The final takeaway is what I call the strategy of the sovereign balance sheet. Listen to me carefully. You are not just a homeowner paying a monthly bill. You need to view yourself as the chief financial officer of a multi-million-dollar enterprise called your family.
A CFO.
And a CFO does not sit on the sidelines waiting for the macroeconomic weather to clear. A CFO does not wait for a politically divided Federal Reserve to dictate the terms of their survival. A CFO structures liabilities aggressively and proactively to protect the enterprise's assets.
Because hoping for a 50 basis point rate drop next year while you actively drown in 24% credit card debt and rising insurance costs today is a losing game.
It is financial suicide. The strategy is to extract maximum equity right now. The collateral your home is still highly valued. The S&P Case-Shiller Index proves the floor is in. And most importantly, the human-controlled banking window is still open before the AI algorithms and the new Basel III endgame capital requirements slam it shut. You use that extracted capital from a refinance to systematically annihilate all high-interest variable consumer debt.
Consolidate it all.
I'm talking about the 24% credit cards, the 9% auto loans, the personal lines of credit that are silently bleeding your discretionary income dry in an inflationary environment. You consolidate everything into one fixed, manageable 30-year American mortgage payment. You build an impenetrable fortress around your family's cash flow, and you completely insulate yourself from the global crosscurrents.
That is incredibly powerful. You're taking the macroeconomic chaos of war, inflation, and AI and turning it into localized, controlled certainty for your household.
Thank you.
This has been an absolute masterclass in cutting through the noise and finding the actual ground truth.
You are very welcome. It's why we have these dinners.
Yeah.
Now, finish that wine. And when we are done clearing these plates, I want you to go open up your laptop, look at your family's balance sheet, and ask yourself one profound question. Are you actively managing your debt, or are you letting the global crosscurrents manage you?